Okay, this is the test that we are going to the 2-inch secondary on it instead of a 2 1/8, and this is basically a 2-inch length right here, and I have several different length extensions that I'm going to do some testing with, just like I did with the 2 1/8. But this is the first test. Next test, I've added 3.5 inches, somewhere right around that, to the secondary length. And we're going to test it and see what it does. Got those tests over with. Now we are down to a 10-inch secondary, somewhere in that range, give or take, probably a 1/2 inch. And we'll make some pulls on it. And I have one more section to add in, and that will be all of the 2-inch secondaries. All right, here is the last test for the 2-inch secondary. I believe this is around 15 inches. We'll test it, see what it does. And I think that's all the lengths I have for the 2-inch secondary. Okay, I've got a bigger board, more information, and kind of going over the tri-Y header combinations of things that I'd done. This last test was with a 2-inch secondary, and the results wasn't what I'd hoped for, but it wasn't bad, it wasn't terrible. The 2 1/8 secondary is definitely the better choice over the 2-inch. Let me go over what I had done here. We had a 2-inch secondary. It was 1 3/4 inch, 7/8 into a 2-inch secondary, lengthwise. Max horsepower was 479. The max torque was 472. The average horsepower was 391. The average torque was 448. That's for the 2-inch secondary. Added 3 inches to it, which made it a 5-inch secondary. It made 490 max horsepower, made 490 max torque, which is a pretty good jump in power by adding 3 inches. The average went to 408 horsepower wise, and the average torque went to 460. So from a 2-inch to a 5-inch, that was the difference where it had picked up. Went to a 9-inch secondary, which is 3 more inches. Max horsepower was 486. It lost a little bit there. The max torque was 481. It lost again. The average horsepower was 406. It lost again versus the 5-inch, and the average torque went to 455. So, the 5-inch so far has been the best. This is where it really starts to get interesting in changing the length. I went to a 12-inch. It made 487 max horsepower, but it made 499 max torque. Average horsepower was 410, and average torque was 460. Went ahead and went to a 15-inch. It made 478 max horsepower, made 487 max torque. Average horsepower was 404, and average torque was 407. If you just look at these numbers up here, there's some differences, but you really don't see where the big advantage started to happen. You start looking at this section down here. What I did was I called the 2-inch secondary my zero baseline, so I could get a feel for what the different tubes lengths did versus the 2-inch. So I would have basically some kind of reference to kind of go off of. So at 3100, if you figure this 2-inch is 0, the 5-inch picked up 26 foot-pounds of torque. The 9-inch, well, let's just do the 5-inch all the way down. So at 3600, the 5-inch lost 4. At 4100, it lost 24. At 4600, it lost 9. At 5100, it lost 4. 5600, it lost 4. And at 6100, it lost 3. And that's 500 RPM increments. So I did the same thing with the 9-inch. At 3100, it lost 9. 3600, it lost 5. 4100, it lost 1. At 4600, it lost 10. 5100, it lost 7. 5600, it lost 4. And 6100, it lost 3. And, that's the 9-inch. There's some guys commented they thought the 9-inch was better. So far, I would say that's probably the worst, because, if you take the secondary or the 2-inch, it was, all the RPM ranges, it was better. So let's go to the 12-inch. This is where it starts to really get interesting in the numbers. At 3100, it was 4 down from the 2-inch. At 3600, it picked up 2 foot-pounds of torque. 4100, it picked up 24 foot-pounds of torque, which is a huge gain. 4600, it picked up 18. 5100, it picked up 12. 5600, it picked up 10. And 6100, it picked up 1. That's with the 12-inch. So I went ahead and did the 15-inch stuff. It was 0, so it was a wash at 3100 with the 2-inch. At 3600, it picked up 4. At 4100, it picked up 24. 4600, it picked up 9. 5100, it picked up 4. 5600, it picked up 4. And 6100, it picked up 4. So it picked up pretty steady up through here. There's some areas that the 12-inch is a little better than the 15-inch, but between the 12 and the 15-inch is the number with this motor combination that you would shoot for. A 13 or 14, a 12, 13, 14, or a 15-inch, a guy could play around with 2 or 3 inches in there and, maybe get a compromise between these two. But that's just a lot more dyno testing, and, this gives me an idea of what had happened. But if you look at 4100 RPM, if you take the 5-inch, which is a minus 24, and a plus 24, that's 48 foot-pounds of torque increase at 4,100 over a 5-inch. So if a guy's running a set of tri-wides with like a 5-inch secondary, he's giving up a ton of torque right in there. Here he is giving up, that would be 18 and 9, 27 foot-pounds of torque, which is another huge number. He's giving up 16 here, giving up 14 here, and here he's giving up 2. So, you know, the 12-inch is a pretty, if I was picking a header for this motor to do, I would probably do the 12-inch. The other interesting fact about this is on the graphs, there was always this kind of dip like this and it would take off. That may be exaggerated. And the dip was still in there with the 2-inch, the 5-inch, and the 9-inch, but it got a little less as I lengthened the secondary. When I got to the 12-inch, it looked like this. It was a nice smooth graph with the 12 and the 15-inch, which I had some people comment, you know, about the dip, and this is a little bit exaggerated, I think, that, you know, possibly timing. I played around with the camshaft, I played around with the timing a little bit, and the dip was always there. So the dip and the secondary length definitely tie together in some shape or form of what's going on inside the motor. But the graph, I'll post some at the end, but the graph is just nice and smooth like that up over. I mean, it's probably one of the most nicest, smoothest graphs that I have seen in a long time, you know, with the 12 and the 15-inch. So the header is definitely doing something for the motor, making the power and smoothing the graph out, which is very interesting. The other thing is, you know, the peakiness. I think a lot of people don't realize that when the motor does this and it takes off, the driver probably feels this big surge of power coming on and feels like that's the better combination instead of being a nice steady pull. And he's going to think that this right here is probably the better setup than this. Unless you dyno it, you may not know. So that's kind of that part right there. I'll go up here. First, I think this motor has pretty much reached its, I think it's pretty much reached its potential as far as what kind of power it's going to make. It's a max 500 horse, you know, motor, 500 foot-pound torque motor. You know, all the header changes I made, it kind of moved power around and made some different power curves on it, and it gained here and lost here on the deal. I think the motor is limited by the intake manifold and the camshaft that's in it. I put a pretty mild camshaft in it just to kind of simulate a street motor, naturally aspirated street motor. I know everybody's into boosted and these big numbers, but you know, there's a lot of guys out there that can't afford to do that. This is a basic pump gas street motor, you know, 500 horse daily driver pump gas motor. So I thought, I'm gonna put a bigger carburetor on it. The one I did all my dyno testing with was a 1400 Braswell, nice carburetor. The motor used 568 CFM. I went to that's a Venturi size. Went to a 1/500 Venturi size, both these same butterfly sizes. Done some dyno pulls with it. And it used 570 CFM. So 2 CFM difference is, you know, basically nothing. I dyno tested, these are the numbers. I got a max horsepower of 490, max torque of 485, average horsepower of 400, and average torque was 455. I did that with the 12-inch secondary, which was this secondary right here that I did that testing with. And, you know, you look at the numbers here versus here, you know, there's not a lot of difference. There is in some instances. Also, I want to let people know this was with a 2-inch secondary, so people would know that was a 2-inch secondary that I did that with. So, and the 2-inch secondary wasn't as good as the 2 1/8 secondary, but the lengths were the same on the lengths that I did it, and it made a little bit less than what it made. A little more horsepower, a couple, 2 or 3 max, but it definitely lost torque. You know, the average was down. No, it wasn't. Yeah, the average was down and the average torque was down. So the 2 1/8 is definitely a better combination of what to use. As far as the secondary length on the Tri-Y headers, I'm probably not going to test. Turn around here. Probably not going to test the 8-into-1 on this motor combination. Probably going to wait and do it when I change the camshaft and put a different intake manifold on it. I've got another camshaft coming for it. Daniel Powell's doing me a camshaft, and I got a single plane manifold to put on it. And I'm going to go back and do some header testing with a better manifold and more camshaft, and see what it does. Probably pick the combination that made the best power with all the testing that I had done with the different tube sizes and the Tri-Y setup. I'm going to pick those combinations and probably go back and dyno test it with the bigger camshaft and better manifold and see what it does. And hopefully the motor will pick up more. And I think there might even be more differences in it. I will probably do some testing with some of the shorter secondaries and maybe some of the shorter straight tube merge collector type stuff. And then once I get that done, I'll probably do the 8-into-1, and everybody can kind of see what it does and what it sounds like. I just want to give it a fair shake as far as what it's capable of doing. So that's kind of why I'm waiting on it. Probably it may be a little bit before I get my camshaft. And I'm going to probably do a couple of videos. I have some head repair that I need to get finished. I've been working on here and there. Do some videos on it, and you'll probably post that stuff up. And then come back to the header tests. I need to get all my header information organized. I have, this is all the, you can see how much paperwork is there. So I've got to go through all this stuff, do some more sorting to come up with, some information that I can supply to people if they're interested. And that's kind of where I'm at. I'll post a few graphs at the end. I'll take a snapshot of this board so people can see it at the end. If they want to pause it and look at it, they can kind of look at the numbers themselves. And I'll put some details on a few of the graphs, and you can see where the graph, how smooth the graph is, and make a kind of determination of what you think. And leave a comment. Got questions? Leave questions. I'll try to answer them the best I can. And that's kind of where I'm at with this deal. I'm, was a little frustrated the last video, but things are going a little better now. So yeah, we'll get through it. It gets frustrating when things don't go the way you think they ought to, but hey, it happens to everybody. You just got to work your way through it. And I appreciate everybody watching, sticking with me. And I'll keep posting stuff as long as people are interested. I'll keep posting stuff, and You know, I'm going to keep plugging away at this header deal. There's a lot to be found in the headers. And, you know, I want to make sure that I have good information and, you know, people can see the difference. And as far as I know, nobody's done any kind of serious header testing like this. So we're going to have a lot of good information here. The motor gets better itself. The motor's healthier. I think the header differences are going to be huge. Or not huge, but there'll be a bigger difference when the motor is more healthy, as I put it. And we'll see what it does. And I appreciate everybody. And like I said, I'll put some graphs at the end. I'll put a snapshot of this at the end. And I'll catch y'all on the next video. I appreciate it.